I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. Okay, did some thinking last night. Before I cut this off and get ready to weld, I want to take this frame off. So I want to be able to put this in the vise over there and hold it while I grind it. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to get these labels off, but I'm going to try. See if I can't get them loose. Because those would be nice, you know. Notice there's a venting screw. You got to open the venting screw to remind you to do the proper thing. But I don't think I'm going to be able to keep earthquake. We'll just have to see if I can protect that with some tape and maybe keep that from getting scratched up going through the vise. We got fire. I'll pump some air in there and let's get her going. It's going to make some background noise, but can't be helped. nut on the inside. Isn't that special? Had to dig a little, but I found them. Washer on the inside, washer on the outside. This is an 18 millimeter, and this nut is a 19 millimeter. Been watching some videos on repair and operation of this splitter, and I've noticed that people are talking about putting a clamp on the button to hold the pump running. Well, this has what's called a high pressure relief. High pressure relief is designed to let the pump run without load. When it comes up against the head. In other words, you stop the ram and leave it running, it's going to keep on running. But it's going to bypass the oil back into the tank. With doing that, the oil has to go through a tight orifice. When that happens, the oil heats up. Not good for hydraulic oil to overheat. Causes things to slip, stresses all the O-rings, causes problems. If you want to come up with something that presses both handle and button at the same time, go right ahead. I don't advise it, but you know, who am I to stop you? The reason I don't advise it, you get your hand in that thing and you've got something tied up onto that so it won't shut off. It's going to severely damage your hand. 5 tons of pressure on your finger, pretty much nip it right off. And if you're holding on to a log when it's in the jaws, and that log splits part way and then pops off while your hand's on top of it, it's going to raise a blood blister like you never want to see. So everybody gets to do what they want to do. I just don't recommend those two things. Neither one of them sounds to be that healthy. Also, I've been thinking about what happened to this splitter. The weld tore loose, that's for sure. But even with that piss poor weld that's on there, and I admit it's not a very good one, even with that being a problem, I don't know if this can generate enough pressure to make that move, make it tear out. Because the ram won't reach. This ram cannot touch that. You'd have to have a log in between. Now there's some marks on this wedge. But we've also got some marks on the side here. I'm wondering if maybe somebody hit this with a fork truck. You know, they're unloading the truck and they go in through the pallet and they stick the forks through there and catch a hold of this thing in the rack. You can put an awful lot of pressure on something with a fork truck. I've had people stick forks through cement block walls, through the sides of tubs like a stamping press, shoving 2 6-inch wide, 2-inch thick forks right on through the sides. So maybe it's not a bad weld after all. Although, even with all that, giving them all the benefit of that doubt, that weld just doesn't look good. I'm not impressed. Well, I'm impressed. Notice it's got it up to 50 in here. millimeter, in case you want to know. Looks like they're all the same length. Now I'll probably get some mineral spirits out after I get this welding done. And try and get the yellow paint off. I don't know if somebody painted it yellow just so they wouldn't use it, or painted it yellow because they were doing something and weren't paying attention. Not sure. But in any case, don't need the yellow. That's what I get for not wearing gloves. Nice using your parents' tools. This was my mom's tool. She bought it to tear up some concrete on her front porch at the farm. One side's broke free. I think I'm going to get it cracked loose. Well, there's your failure point. I'm going to take a good close look at this. They never ground off the mill scale. So that just never stuck. Just peeled right off. You can still see the mill scale on the part. So that's why it failed. It was only holding on one side. And this part in here, this has still got the mill scale on it. Now that I got this pulled off of there, I can see that this weld goes on this side. They never ground off the mill scale on that piece of steel. So when the weld went up against it, it never penetrated. It just laid up against there and chilled off. They didn't grind off the mill scale on this base either. All they did with that is just kind of stick it there. And all this weld up in the nose, might as well not even bother. All that is caulk. It doesn't even hold anything. After it came off the plasma cutting table, went through the sandblaster before it was welded. So it was all clean steel, no mill scale on it at all. But we still cut the welds apart, checked them, and before anybody got qualified to weld, they had to pass a mill spec. The welding engineer gave them all the tests. They went through the weld school and were taught how to weld, and then they were inspected on their welds through every batch. That's why I looked at this and I said, this, back when I got this, I said, that's a bad weld job. Now that I've got it apart, I can see a better example of why it's a bad weld job. I'll have to grind off all that weld, clean up this face, clean up that, get all this crap weld off of there, get it cleaned down. Clean this all up, grind off all that weld, get rid of the weld spatter, and all this extra bead bunch of iron laid on there that didn't do anything. Now, I don't know if they were doing it with MIG or stick. Can't tell from this. But if I had to say, I bet it was the MIG. It's a little easier to get penetration with a stick. MIG, you can turn the weld down and it does a much nicer, smoother bead. It looks good, but it doesn't penetrate. Especially if you got mill scale on the part. The time I spent working on that's going to be well worth it. I figured out why it broke, got a good understanding of what happened, and now I can fix it with confidence. Never trust any of the welds on it again, unless I go through and do them all over again. Don't think I will. Not really worth the trouble. Most of them don't see anywhere near the load that splitting wedge does. But if you got one of these electric hydraulic log splitters at 5 tons, I'd be cautious around that wedge. Doesn't look like it's a real secure weld job on it. If you have any suggestions for new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.
This video is not to be viewed by anyone under the age of 13 in the U.S. or 16 in the European Union without the express written permission of the parents or the legal guardians of the underage person. Such written permission must be on file at the local government entity in charge of enforcing the rules and regulations established by the FTC. Anyone violating these terms is admitting by default that they hold harmless the owners and operators of this channel. Any and all questions should be addressed to your local branch of the FTC.